Invite Mr. Temwamo to give us a word of prayer. Thank you.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you for this beautiful morning. We thank you that you have granted us life. We thank you for the report that is about to be released. And we thank you according to your word, where you have said in the book of Proverbs 29, when the righteous are in control, people rejoice. When the wicked are in control, people, Abba Father, oppress. So we pray, may this report, Abba Father, bring joy to the nation of Malawi and be good for a greater good. We thank you, we honor you, we ask you to be with us to the end. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. The Ombudsman, Honorable Martha Chizuma. We do have a number of representatives from various institutions that are very key to this report. We have from Mayor Board, Ms. Phyllis Manguluti, representing the board chair for Malawi Energy Regulatory Authority. I recognize the presence of Mr. Matanda, Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Energy. We also have Mr. Ismail Chiwoko, who is the acting CEO for Malawi Energy Regulatory Authority. Let me also recognize the presence of Mr. Stuart Ligomeka, who was the former controller of statutory corporations. Members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, today we are releasing the report titled Institutional Anarchy. This is an investigation report in the matter of alleged and procedural recruitment of the Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Collins Magalasi, improper and irregular recruitment of other members of staff, and other acts of maladministration at the Malawi Energy Regulatory Authority. I know a lot of you have been calling me every time, asking me when these reports are going to be released. Today, we have that opportunity to write again on what you had previously written, that we are conducting this investigation. Before taking any more time on this, let me invite the Honorable Ombudsman to present what we are all here for, the said report. Thank you very much, Honorable Ombudsman.
Thank you very much, Arthur. I would like to once again welcome you to this presentation of our report on an investigation that our office carried out following a complaint that we received on 20th September 2020 on various acts of maladministration on the recruitment of the former CEO of MERA, Dr. Collins Magalasi, and also recruitment of some staff at MERA, amongst others. This is the first report that we are releasing in the series of investigations that this office is carrying out on several parastatals. So with MERA being the first report, we hope to release 2 more next week. Now, coming back to the main issue at hand, the complaint raised a number of allegations. The first one was on the irregular recruitment of the CEO. The allegation being that Dr. Collins Magalasi was appointed in November 2017 without the job being advertised to allow competitiveness of willing and eligible applicants. This was contrary to the provisions of the Energy Regulation Act, which requires that the job be advertised. Irregular recruitment of the Director of Electricity and Renewable Energy, Mr. Maxwell Nkumba. It was alleged that Mr. Nkumba did not possess a master's degree in electrical engineering or renewable technology as required by the post and as was advertised. It was further alleged that he did not apply for the job and neither did he attend interviews for the job. The third one was irregular recruitment of the Director for Liquid Fuel and Gas, Mrs. Alinafe Nkamveya. It was alleged that Mrs. Nkamveya does not have prerequisite qualifications for the position, which according to the job description and the advert that was released during the recruitment is a master's degree in chemical engineering, chemistry, or engineering. Irregular recruitment, that's the fourth one. Irregular recruitment of the Director of Economic Regulation, Mr. Chimwemwe Dunkalo. The complaint alleged that the position of Director of Economic Regulation had specific prerequisite education qualification requirements, namely a master's degree in economics. However, the CEO, Dr. Collins Magalasi, modified these prerequisites to suit the current director who does not have this qualification. The fifth one was irregular recruitment of internal audit manager, Mr. Alex Ganiza, who it is alleged was employed to the position of internal audit manager, notwithstanding that he does not possess the prerequisite qualification for entry for the job, which is professional qualification of accountancy, such as the Association of Chartered Accountants, ACA, Chartered Public Accountants, CPA, or Chartered Institute of Management, CIMA. The fifth one was irregular promotion of the legal manager, Ms. Cynthia Chawani, who, contrary to MERA's recruitment policy, was promoted from her position of senior legal officer to her current position of legal manager before serving 4 years on the senior legal officer position. Number 7, the complaint was on the nepotistic recruitment of planning and monitoring manager, Mr. Godfrey Chilenga. The allegation was that Mr. Chilenga was recruited just before June 23, 2020 fresh presidential pause as the planning and monitoring manager because he's a nephew to Honorable Weran Chilenga, notwithstanding that there were other well-deserving candidates for the position. In addition, it is alleged that the CEO allowed this promotion due to his affiliation and allegiance to Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, as the CEO used to be the advisor to the DPP president then. The other complaint was that there was irregular and discriminatory recruitment of senior information communications and technology officer, Mr. Bire Kaira, in that he did not meet prerequisite qualifications of the post, which is a master's degree in ICT. This is notwithstanding the fact that the CEO had previously barred other officers from occupying posts which require master's degree because they do not have such qualification. The next complaint was fraudulent recruitment of Mr. Troy Ntenje, the current human resource manager. The allegation states that Mr. Ntenje had lied that he had previously worked at Malawi Revenue Authority as human resource officer, a position which requires bachelor's degree. And yet, Mr. Ntenje was a customs officer and only possessed an MSCE. The number 9 was abuse of benefits by the CEO's personal assistant, Mrs. Priscilla Nkandawire, who it is alleged that the CEO approved enjoyment of motor vehicle and fuel benefits contrary to MERA's terms and conditions of service. In addition to the complaint above, on 2nd November 2020, my office received an additional complaint against the current acting chief executive officer of MERA, Mr. Ishmael Chuoko. The said complaint alleged that the position of Director of Legal Services requires the candidate to possess a master's degree in law. It is alleged that Mr. Chuoko did not qualify for the said position as he did not possess a master's degree in law when he was recruited. Furthermore, the allegation stated that Mr. Ishmael Chuoko was appointed as the acting CEO by the board of MERA on 11th August, when the said board, on 11th of August 2020, when the said board was dissolved on 15th July 2020. They therefore state that the appointment was illegal. My office conducted this investigation through public inquiries with various individuals under oath and demand of submission of documentations or written responses. Some of the people that we interfaced with in this manner included Dr. Collins McClass himself, the board members of MERA during the period of illegal or during the period of the alleged illegal or irregular recruitments in question, which included Bishop Dr. Joseph Vumbwe, Mrs. Felisa Kelembe Metambo, and Mr. Kwaule Msiska. I also conducted an inquiry with Mr. Patrick Matanda, the Principal Secretary for Energy, who is also the ex-official member for the authority, and Mr. Stuart Ligomega, who was the Comptroller of Statutory Corporations during the time in question. I also received submissions from Ms. Nwazi Ntambala, the current Comptroller of Statutory Corporations. Further to this, I held meetings and inquiries with all members of staff that were mentioned in the complaint in order to give them an opportunity to comment on their recruitment or promotion or any allegation that was raised against them. On the issue of illegality of the recruitment of the former CEO, Mr. Dr. Collins McClass, basically what the previous board members told me is that they understood that under Section 18 of the Energy Regulation Act, it was their responsibility to appoint a chief executive officer. Upon the position becoming vacant in February 2017, following the departure of Mr. Rafael Kamoto, they decided as a board to recruit a CEO. However, they were advised by the ex-officio members from Ministry of Energy and Statutory Corporation that such positions cannot be recruited without formally informing the Comptroller of Statutory Corporation of its intention to fill the vacancy. According to the letter, the board was submitting this letter for the Comptroller's kind information and further guidance. After they sent the letter to the Department of Statutory Corporations, they received an acknowledgement of receipt from the then Comptroller, Mr. Stuart Ligomeka, informing them that he had submitted the board's resolution to recruit to high authorities for final approval before the board commences the process as is required. The board did not receive any further response from OPC or the Comptroller of Statutory Corporations. As such, they wrote another letter informing them that they were moving forward with the recruitment. In the meantime, the board chair, Bishop Vumbwe, also had a meeting with the chief secretary on the same. They then received a letter dated 13th November 2017 from the Comptroller of Statutory Corporation informing them that Dr. Collins Maglasi had been appointed as Chief Executive Officer for MELA with effect from 9th September 2017. The former chairperson stated that this appointment took them by surprise, as their wish was that the appointment would be done after the position had been advertised and the candidates competed. Even though they were surprised, looking at the history of how CEOs at MERA were appointed, the board endorsed the appointment and proceeded to write to Dr. Maglasi a letter of appointment on 20th November 2017. The Principal Secretary for Energy, Mr. Matanda, simply restated the same sequence of events and said that Dr. Maglasi was appointed by the President in 2017. According to him, such appointments are not unusual, as the Public Service Act does empower the President to do so. Mr. Stuart Ligomeka, who was the Comptroller of Statutory Corporations then, stated that when it comes to recruitment, the Department of Statutory Corporations plays several roles, one of which was to facilitate appointment for executive management. He said this was done because when this was left to parastatals themselves, they used to manipulate the shortlisting and take out competition. He said that in as far as the appointment of Dr. Maglasi is concerned, he received the submission of intention to fill the vacancy from the board chair, which he passed on to the chief secretary then, who then later on wrote a letter appointing Dr. Maglasi to the position of CEO of MERA. When I asked him under which law is the MERA CEO appointed, he said that that is an ongoing debate. When I inquired from Dr. Maglasi about his appointment, he stated that he was appointed as 5th CEO of MERA under Section 18 of the Energy Regulation Act, just as his predecessors. He said that he developed interest into energy when he was in Zimbabwe and that he previously made several unsolicited applications to the post. When his contract at State House expired in 2017, he got an appointment letter from MERA and he accepted. The Energy Regulation Act under Section 18 provides that a CEO of MERA is appointed by the authority or the board. However, when MERA board attempted to discharge their functions and recruit a CEO, the whole process got hijacked by the Comptroller and the Office of the President and Cabinet, resulting in the appointment of Dr. Maglasi as CEO of MERA by the President then. From my reading of the Enabling Act of MERA, which is the Energy Regulations Act, there is no provision providing for the Comptroller of Statutory Corporation or the Office of the President and Cabinet to play any role on the board of MERA or to get involved in any business of MERA. The Act is a 2007 creature, and according to the former Comptroller of Statutory Corporation, the Department of Statutory Corporation was created by an administrative order of 1982. One would therefore expect that when establishing MERA, some 25 years after the creation of the Department of Statutory Corporation, the Act would have incorporated the Department of Statutory Corporation if the lawmakers had intended that they would facilitate the recruitment process of the CEO or be the appointing authority of the CEO. the advice by the ex-official members to the board on the role of the Department of Statutory Corporations and the consequent actions by the Comptroller of Statutory Corporations himself were therefore illegal, they were wrong and misguided. They were maladministration. I need to add, though, that I'm of a firm view that it is important that there should be the presence of the Comptroller of Statutory Corporations in all the parastatals in the country. But the same ought to be properly guided by policy or law to avoid this scenario as it happened here, where the comptroller, with support or on being directed by the secretary to the president and cabinet, went on a frolic on his own and committed all sorts of illegalities in the management of the parastatals in the name of giving governance advice to the parastatal. The comptroller further attempted to justify the appointment of Dr. Maglassi on the basis that the presidency is mandated to make such appointments by power vested in him by Section 89 of the Constitution and Section 6 of the Public Service Act. I do not agree with this position for several reasons. To begin with, in my view, the Constitution under Section 89(1)(d) does not give overriding powers to the President to appoint the CEO under the Public Service Act as he chooses. This provision clearly stated that the appointment by the President is subject to the Constitution and the Act of Parliament. This means that the powers to appoint to a specific position have to be stated in the Constitution itself, or indeed the Act of Parliament that is relevant to the appointment must mention that the President is the appointing authority. For instance, the Constitution clearly gives the power to the President to appoint persons to the positions of Attorney General, Inspector General, and other positions. In as far as the Acts of Parliament, the Corrupt Practices Act provides for the appointment of the Director General of the Anti-Corruption Bureau by the President. This is what Section 89(a)(d) is all about. Any understanding short of this is contrary to the law and therefore illegal. Secondly, as much as MERA is a public institution, it has a statute which creates the institution and also guides its operations. Other than the Constitution, this is the statute which should be the first port of call for guidance on anything to do with the institution and should take precedence over any other law. I therefore do not see why one should have recourse to the Public Service Act or go around looking for other provisions to justify making certain appointments when there is a specific statute available which has spoken on the issue in question. If there was a lacuna, having recourse to the Public Service Act would then make sense. Even if I'm wrong in my understanding of the law, when one looks at the Public Service Act, one cannot look at Section 6 of the said Act in isolation. The preceding provision, in particular Section 4 of the Public Service Act, guides the President or any other appointing authorities within the public sector that they can only appoint a person to a position in the public service after a fair, open competition which assures that all citizens receive equal opportunity. This means that any purported appointment by the President or any other authority under the Public Service Act has to be preceded by a fair and open competition. The fact that Dr. Maglassi's appointment surpassed the board, which is a legally mandated authority, was effected by the President and did not follow the process for open and fair competition is contrary to the existing laws, and therefore it was maladministration. As a matter of remedying this, I noticed that the tenure of Dr. Maglassi as the CEO has been overtaken by events as his contract expired. If he was still in employment, I would have immediately nullified his appointment for reason that it was illegal. This is how, as a country, we walk the talk on a rule of law and ensure that public confidence in government administration does not get shattered and arbitrary actions do not get sanctified. Whilst I'm aware that Dr. Maglassi did provide a service for which he was paid during the time of illegal employment, this does not in any way regularize his employment. His appointment or initial entry into MELA was illegal and therefore unenforceable both at law and public policy. As the CEO of a parastatal like MELA, he knew, or if he did not know, he ought to have known that his employment was illegal. Accordingly, whilst Dr. Maglassi provided a service for the period of his contract, the whole exercise remains in the realm of an unauthorized adventure. Nothing comes out of nothing, and no claim can arise out of this, because any right to such claim is consequential to a valid appointment which was non-existent in this case. I therefore direct the board to treat Dr. Maglass's contract as a nullity right from the start. Accordingly, the board should not pay him any end of term benefits, and if the same have already been paid, they should be reclaimed. If Mr. Maglass would like to pursue any claim regarding this, then the same should lie personally with the authority, that is the president that illegally appointed him. The second complaint is that Mr. Nkumba, now deceased, did not possess a master's degree in electrical engineering or renewable technology as required by the post of Director of Renewable Energy and as was advertised. It was further alleged that he did not apply for the job and neither did he attend interviews for the job. The evidence I gathered showed that the board had conducted interviews for the post of Director of Economic Regulations, DER, and the Director of Electricity and Renewable Energy, DERE, on the same day in November 2019. Mr. Nkumba had only applied for, was invited to, and only attended interviews for the Director of Economic Regulation position. He came first after the interviews, followed by Mr. Chimwemwe Dunkalo, who at that time was the acting Director of Energy Regulation. The position was given to Mr. Dunkalo because he was already acting on the position and had qualifications. However, since none of the candidates performed well on the Director of Energy, on the Director of Electricity and Renewable Energy position, the board, which on that day included the ex-official member and the Comptroller of Statutory Corporation, after noting from Mr. Nkumba's CV that he had done a lot on renewable energy, although he's an economist, offered Mr. Nkumba the position of Director of Electricity and Renewable Energy. And the latter, that is Mr. Nkumba, accepted. This was done without subjecting him to any of the questions that the other candidates who applied for the position were asked on that day. They simply gave him the position. Under clause 5.3 of the Mayoral Recruitment Policy, an external candidate for director position is supposed to have a minimum of a relevant master's degree, and in this case, engineering. The advert was even more specific, and based on Mera's job description handbook, it stated that the candidate should have had a master's and a bachelor's degree in electrical or renewable energy engineering, and be registered with the Malawi Institute of Engineers or any other relevant professional bodies. Mr. Nkumba had none of these education qualifications, neither was he registered with the Malawi Institute of Engineers. One would expect Mr. Nkumba to have done exceedingly well for the position of the Director of Economic Regulation, as he is an economist and had worked as an economist for 10 years, for many years. The board, however, should not have taken his good performance in the area where he is well qualified and has much expertise to justify recruiting him in a position he does not qualify in, let alone applied for. To make it worse, they did not even attempt to interview him for the position of the Director of Electricity and Renewable Energy to assess whether, despite not having the necessary qualifications, he would have been able to respond to the necessary technical questions that were asked to the candidates who attended the interviews for this post. Instead, they only called him to ask if he could take up this position. This kind of reasoning is outrageous, and it sets a very dangerous precedent for Mera and the energy sector of the country, as it eventually leads to loss on the required expertise in the energy field, and it defeats the whole purpose of having job descriptions and requirements for each particular position. To say the least, this act was unfair to the other candidates that were interviewed for that post, even though they performed poorly, as Mr. Nkumba was not even interviewed for that position. The acts of the board were contrary to Mera's recruitment policy and therefore maladministration. All in all, it is my finding that Mr. Nkumba applied for the position of Director of Energy Regulation, which he appeared for in person for interviews. Mr. Nkumba did not apply for the position of the Director of Electricity and Renewable Energy, and he was not interviewed for this position. Mr. Nkumba did not qualify for the position of the Director of Electricity and Renewable Energy. As such, his recruitment was contrary to Mera's recruitment policy, therefore irregular. It was maladministration, and the body's decision to give Mr. Nkumba a position for which he did not apply for, he did not qualify, he did not interview for, was neglect of duty, it was unprocedural and unreasonable. This was maladministration. In considering the remedy in this matter, I again note that the issue of recruitment of Mr. Nkumba has again been overtaken by events following his demise on or around 27 January 2021. However, his recruitment was highly irregular, and if it remained an issue, it would have been nullified. I therefore direct the Board of MERA to treat the late Mr. Nkumba's employment as a nullity in all its consequent formalities. Any possible claim for benefits arising from this irregular employment by the late Mr. Nkumba's family cannot lie against MERA, but should be made against the individual board members who recruited him, knowing that he possessed no qualifications and without subjecting him to any interviews. Moreover, I further direct that in subsequent recruitment processes for this position, MERA should allow all Malawians who satisfy the criteria to compete in a fair manner. The third complaint that was lodged in my office was against Mr. Dunkalo, that the position of Director of Economic Regulation had specific prerequisite education qualification requirements, namely a master's degree in economics. However, the CEO of MERA modified these prerequisites to suit the current director who does not have this qualification. The evidence shows that Mr. Dunkalo was one of the people that were moved from Petroleum Control Commission to commence the formation of MERA in 2008. His first position with MERA was as economist for fossil fuels and gas. He was later promoted to senior economist for fuels and gas, which was later changed to senior economic regulation specialist. In February 2019, he was appointed as acting director of economic regulation, and he acted on the position up to February 2020. After acting for 1 year, the post was advertised, he attended interviews, and was appointed as the director of economic regulation. When he joined MERA, he had a bachelor's degree in social science, majoring in economics. Now he has a master's degree in business administration, which he obtained in 2015. He is also a member of the Economic Association of Malawi. The job description handbook of MERA provides that the person holding this position must have a master's degree in economics or business administration plus 7 years experience at senior specialist level. At the time of the interviews, Mr. Dunkalo had all the prerequisite requirements, as he had a bachelor's degree in social science, majoring in economics, and a master's of business administration, majoring in economics, which he attained in 2015. He also had the needed experience. The master's degree in business administration appears in the handbook. As such, it is not a qualification that was inserted by the former CEO, Dr. Maglasi, to suit Mr. Dunkalo for the purposes of this interview. It was approved by the government after conducting... Can you control that? Okay. It was approved by the government after conducting the functional review. Furthermore, in my view, a master's degree in business administration majoring in economics is within the same discipline as master's degree in economics. Mr. Dunkalo therefore qualified for this position, and I dismiss this complaint in its entirety for lack of merit. The fourth allegation that was raised in this complaint was for the position of the Director for Liquid Fuel and Gas, Mrs. Alinafe Nkaveya. It was alleged that Mrs. Nkaveya does not have the prerequisite qualifications for the position, which, according to the job description and the advert that was released during the recruitment, is a master's degree in chemical engineering, chemistry, or engineering. The evidence I gathered following the 2017 functional review, the technical directorate of MERA was split into two directorates, namely the Director of Liquid Fuel and Gas and the Directorate of Electricity and Renewable Energy. MERA advertised for the post of Director of Liquid Fuel and Gas in the local newspapers on 16th November 2015. MERA shortlisted 6 suitable candidates, of which 4 were external and 2 were internal. The advert for the position that was published in the Daily Times newspaper provided that the required qualification for the position of Director of Fuel, Liquid and Gas, where he must possess a master's degree in science, chemistry, or engineering, at least 10 years experience at senior management level in a reputable organization, must demonstrate experience in team building initiatives, and must demonstrate thorough knowledge of the energy sector. Mrs. Nkanveya has a bachelor's degree in education and a master's degree in business administration. The allegation that was leveled against her, that she does not possess the prerequisite requirements, is therefore true. In trying to justify why she was picked when she did not meet the qualifications, it was stated by both the board and herself that it was not easy to find someone with the technical qualifications as well as the experience. This does not, however, make her recruitment irregular. The moment the board discovered that no one who had applied for the job was meeting the requirements, prudence would have demanded that the post be re-advertised. If it is indeed a challenge to find some qualifying candidates, then management should have notified the Department of Human Resource and Development of their predicament for proper advice in line with Regulation 106 of the MPSR, which provides for reporting to DHRMD in such scenarios. The board clearly did not do this, but proceeded with the recruitment process. In the case of Mrs. Nkanveya, I have noted that she has a bachelor's of education majoring in chemistry, and she has the relevant experience. Considering how important a first degree in a relevant technical field is, I made some informal inquiries on the difference between a bachelor's degree in education chemistry and a bachelor's of science in chemistry. And I found that the course content for the two is the same. The only difference is that in the bachelor's degree in education chemistry, they add education courses, whilst for the bachelor's of science degree, they add other pure science courses. She therefore possesses the relevant first degree necessary in the field she's working. When I assessed the interview report, in particular the number of people who were shortlisted, their qualifications and experience as of that time, and their performance during the interviews, I am convinced that her recruitment had nothing to do with bias, nepotism, or favoritism, because she was the best candidate out of the ones that attended the interviews, all of which were missing one of the requirements, be it bachelor's degree in chemistry or any science, a master's degree in science, or the required experience in the field. Given these circumstances, I therefore find her recruitment was in order. The failure by the board to formulate alternative requirements for the position or re-advertise when one considers the particular facts of this recruitment would not have changed the outcome of the interviews. She still would have prevailed. I make further finding that there were no issues of favoritism, nepotism, or bias in the recruitment process of Mrs. Nkanveya by Dr. Collins Maglassi, as she started working at MERA way before Dr. Maglassi joined as CEO. I therefore dismiss this complaint in its entirety. The fourth allegation raised was on the irregular promotion of the internal auditor and risk manager. It is alleged that Mr. Alex Makaneza, the current internal audit and risk manager, was employed to the position of internal audit manager, notwithstanding that he does not possess the prerequisite qualification for entry for the job, which is professional qualification of accountancy, such as ACA, CPA, and CIMA. The evidence shows that he joined MERA as an internal auditor in 2009 with a diploma in accounting. In 2018, he obtained a degree in accounting. In the same year, there was a functional review of MERA, which changed his position to internal audit and risk officer. Following the move of his immediate boss to finance section, a recommendation was made that he should be considered for the position of the internal audit and risk manager. As of that time, he had a master's degree in business administration from ESAMI. He was therefore interviewed for the promotion and he received an offer on 16 September 2018. According to MERA, there was nothing wrong with the recruitment of Mr. Ganeza as internal auditor and risk manager because his promotion was in accordance with Clause 5 of the recruitment policy, which provides that serving employees applying for manager level, grade M3, shall possess a minimum qualification of a bachelor's degree and a master's degree with 5 years experience in the current position. However, I note that the recruitment policy of MERA is dated April 2018 and was endorsed by the chairman of the board, Reverend Dr. Bishop Vumbwe, and the CEO, Dr. Maglassi, on 8th May 2018. MERA also has a job description handbook, which was prepared by the DHRMD of the OPC and is dated July 2018. This handbook provides that the minimum education qualifications and experience for the position of the internal audit and risk manager are master's degree plus professional qualification at chartered level and 5 years relevant experience. Mr. Ganiza himself admitted that the qualification required for this position is a master's degree and a professional qualification like ACA, CPA, or CIMA, which he does not have. He, however, stated that these qualifications are not really required in finance. It is my considered view that the job description handbook of July 2018 superseded the mayoral recruitment policy of May 2018 in terms of application. Being a more latest document to guide such issues, the assumption is that in drawing this handbook, government considered the mayoral's policies, including the recruitment policy, and further took into consideration the issues raised by Mr. Ganiza on the lack of importance of the professional accounting qualification to audit, and still felt it right to provide the minimum requirements as provided for in the handbook and included the professional qualifications in accounting. The job description handbook provided for new minimum requirements for each position. MERA cannot therefore have another document which sets a lower standard than the approved government minimum standards and qualifications required. MERA is duty bound to ensure that their documents speak to each other and that they prioritize the interests of the institution and the country. As it stands, it appears that the individuals at MERA want to, at all costs, safeguard their position in the institution, even if they lack expertise that government, after reviewing the needs of the institution, has dictated that an individual ought to possess. Even if I was wrong on this, I find it completely retrogressive, unreasonable, and contrary to democratic principles of fairness and justice that MERA should have a policy that provides for lower qualifications for internal staff for particular position than external candidates. In my view, the only advantage an internal staff should have to get a position in their institution is the fact that she is the only one who qualifies for that particular job in the institution, not the lack of qualification thereof. It is wrong. I'm therefore of the firm view that the holder of this position, whether it is an internal or external candidate, ought to have bachelor's degree, master's degree, and a professional qualification at a chartered level. Although the handbook did not specify the areas of study for the bachelor's degree and master's degree, for such a specialized area, one would correctly assume that it must be in accounting or business or a similar subject. The CEO of MERA also said that Mr. Ganiza is an active member of the Institute of Internal Auditors of Malawi, where he also holds membership in the Ethics and Disciplinary Committee. Whether Mr. Ganiza enjoys membership of the Institute of Internal Auditors of Malawi is neither here nor there. MERA's own job description handbook of July 2018 demands that he must have professional qualification at chartered level. All in all, it is my finding that the position for internal audit and risk manager requires that one, whether they are an internal or candidate, should possess professional qualification. And the current holder, Mr. Alex Ganiza, does not possess the professional minimum requirements for the position. As such, he did not qualify for the promotion, and therefore his subsequent promotion was irregular. I therefore direct that Mr. Ganiza should revert to his old position of internal audit and risk officer. MERA should re-advertise the manager position and allow those who have the necessary qualification to compete for the position. The fifth allegation was that the legal manager, Mrs. Cynthia Chawani, was promoted from her position as senior legal officer to her current position of legal manager before serving 4 years on the senior legal officer position, contrary to MERA's recruitment policy. The evidence shows that Mrs. Chawani joined MERA on 16 February 2016 as a legal officer. She then acted for the position of senior legal officer following the resignation of the job holder. The director of legal services and board secretary, Mr. Ishmael Shuoko, recommended to management that she be promoted, and she was duly promoted to the position of the senior legal officer on 9 January 2019. In July 2019, there was a vacancy for legal services manager, and she applied for the job, attended interviews, and she was given the offer, which she accepted. Evidence, however, shows that initially, the internal vacancy evidence shows that initially the internal vacancy shortlisting team did not shortlist Ms. Chawani, did not qualify due to that she did not have 4 years experience recruitment at her current position of senior legal officer as per MERA's recruitment policy. When the report of the shortlisting team was submitted to the former CEO, Dr. Maglassi, he approved the report but directed the shortlisting team to add Ms. Chawani to the interview list for legal services manager. During my interaction with her, Ms. Chawani stated that it was the first time she looked at the advert. Clause 5 of MERA recruitment policy of April 2018 states that serving employees up manager level shall mean qualification. From the evidence gathered, Ms. Chawani was promoted from the position of senior legal officer to that of legal manager after serving as senior legal officer for about 5 months. As at the time of the promotion, she had been in MERA for 3 years. This was contrary to recruitment policy when it comes to internal vacancies. The justification for allowing Ms. Chawani to attend the interviews internally as the only candidate was that her number of years of experience was more than 5 when they added the experience she acquired whilst in MERA and that from elsewhere. I think she was working at Ministry of Justice. This was, however, an internal vacancy, and by virtue of being an internal vacancy, the requirement of 5 years experience at her current position ought to have been used. The justification for allowing Ms. Chawani to attend the interviews internally as the only candidate was that her number of years of experience was more than 5 when they add the experience she acquired whilst in MERA and that from elsewhere. It is surprising that MERA, knowing that it did not have an officer who satisfied the requirements, still proceeded to advertise the position internally. What is even more surprising is that the internal vacancy shortlisting team rightly decided not to shortlist her as she did not meet the experience requirement at her current position. But somehow the CEO directed that she be interviewed nonetheless. This was abuse of power, and management failed to take into account relevant factors in deciding whether or not to promote her. I do not see how Ms. Chawani, being a lawyer herself, would not be aware of the requirements for one to be promoted internally to a managerial position, as she was claiming during the inquiry. Having worked in the institution for 3 years, she ought to have known that in accordance with MERA policy, one cannot just jump from one position to another within a space of 5 months without attending external interviews pursuant to Section 4 of the Public Service Act, which provides that entry into and advancement within the public service shall be determined solely on the basis of merit, namely relative ability, knowledge, skill, and aptitude, after a fair and open competition, which assures that all citizens receive equal opportunity. The promotion herein was therefore in clear violation of Section 4 of the Public Service. It was contrary to MERA's recruitment qualified internal candidates. The post should have been advertised externally, thereby ensuring that there's open competition based on merit. I therefore direct that Ms. Chawani should revert to her old post of senior legal officer, and the post of the legal services manager should be advertised externally, and the best candidate should end the job. The sixth allegation in the complaint is about the nepotistic recruitment of the planning, monitoring, and evaluation manager, Mr. Godfrey Chilenga. It is alleged that Mr. Chilenga was recruited just before the June 23, 2020 fresh presidential election, posed as the current planning and monitoring manager because he's a nephew of Honorable Werani Chilenga. Notwithstanding that, there were other well-deserving candidates for the position. In addition, it is alleged that the CEO allowed this promotion due to the affiliation and allegiance, due to his affiliation and allegiance to the Democratic Progressive Party as CEO, as he used to be advisor to the DPP president. According to the evidence, the position for planning, monitoring, and evaluation manager was advertised externally in 2019, and Mr. Chilenga applied on 4th of April 2019. He attended interviews on 26 March 2020 and passed very well. He, however, came second after scoring 84%. The first candidate was Mr. Pachalo Mwanza, who scored 85.60%. However, the position was not offered to Mr. Pachalo as he did not get positive references, whereas Mr. Chirenga got good references. When I asked for evidence of the references received for the two candidates, it transpired that the former CEO, Dr. Maglassi, was the one who received the reference for Mr. Pachalo Mwanza. When I inquired from Dr. Maglassi, it transpired that in May 2019, an anonymous source named Chris Kaunda at yahoo.com sent an email communication to the former CEO, Dr. Maglassi, which warned him that Pachalo Mwanza is a super WikiLeaks and that in Chichewa alindizi goba zingapo. In their mind, a super WikiLeaks would potentially be leaking Mera's classified information. The Alindizi Goba Zingapo was interpreted to be fake platforms or user accounts such as Facebook, WhatsApp, and Twitter. When I queried Mera further on the sequence of events leading up to the receipt of this email reference, the documentation shows that through a memo dated 30th March 2020, the Human Resource and Administration Manager, Mr. Troy Ntenje, submitted to the CEO a report on the interviews held for the post of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation Manager. The report recommended that the job be offered to Mr. Pachalo Mwanza, who was the best-rated candidate, subject to a satisfactory reference check. If Mr. Mwanza was to turn down the offer, then the second-best candidate, Mr. Geoffrey Chilenga, would be offered the position subject to satisfactory reference check. According to the documentation, on 6th of April 2020, Dr. Maglassi directed Mr. Ntenje to get references for the first and the second candidates. On 8th of April, 3 letters signed by the CEO, Dr. Maglassi, were sent to Mr. Maganga, Mr. Mfune, and Mr. Souza. All these 3 were referees for the second candidate, Mr. Chilenga. No letters requesting references were sent to any of the first candidate, Mr. Pachalo Mwanza's referees. On 15th April 2020, reference letters were received from Mr. Maganga, who worked with Mr. Chilenga at Christian Health Association of Malawi, and another one from Derek Souza, who worked with Mr. Chilenga at NICE. And on 6th of May 2020, the last reference letter was received from Mr. Agre Mfune, the Executive Director of SEED Malawi. The documentation further shows that on 8th May 2020, the Human Resource and Administration Manager followed up with the CEO as he had not yet signed or released from his office the letters requesting for reference letters for Mr. Pachalo Mwanza, despite those letters being sent to his office at the same time as those going to Mr. Chilenga's referees. On 15th of April 2020, on 15th April 2020, reference letters were received from I think I've already said that. When I further inquired from Dr. Maglassi about the anonymous reference email, he then changed statements saying that the email did not come through his email inbox. It came as a hard copy in an envelope addressed to him and was left at Mera Gate. He stated that at first he ignored the submission, but upon reflection and seeing that the email said reminder by saying, in quotes, "I know you received this," he was faced with a potential breach. He was faced with a potential accusation of negligence if he did not act on it. He admitted that he never tried to confirm the validity or the authenticity of this reference email, as the inquiry mail he sent to the email address of Chris Kaunda was never responded to. He further stated that he does not know a Chris Kaunda, and he also does not know how the said Chris Kaunda knew that they were about to make an offer to Mr. Pachalo Mwanza. He, however, said it was based on this email reference that no offer was made to Mr. Pachalo Mwanza. As per the accepted practice, when it comes to appointing candidates after interviews, the employer will consider 2 or 3 of the top candidates. In this case, the interview panel recommended that the former CEO, Dr. Maglassi, should consider the phase 2 candidates. And on 6th of April 2020, Dr. Maglassi directed Mr. Ntenje, the human resource manager, to get references for the first candidate, Pachalo Manza, and the second candidate, Godfrey Chilenga, as is required by Clause 9 of Mayor Recruitment Policy. However, on 6th of April 2020, Dr. Maglassi only signed for the request for reference letters for Godfrey Chilenga. And in his defense, he stated that he did not contact the referees for Mr. Manza because the procedure is that if the first of the recommended candidates fails in reference checks or does not take up the offer, the door opens for the next candidate in line. Following the printed email, they could not therefore proceed to source further references for Mr. Manza, hence getting references for Mr. Chilenga. Although this is indeed the procedure that is followed, there are a few problems with this alleged email reference. For starters, it shows that it was unsolicited, and there's nothing about it showing that the reference came from Mr. Manza's supervisor, which is what good practice demands, that a reference of a candidate competence and character comes from his or her supervisor. Moreover, one wonders, for a process that is supposed to be confidential, how this referee got to know that an offer was about to be made and that she had to intervene. The second problem with this alleged email reference is its date. This purported email is dated 13th and 15th May 2019, which is a whole year before the interviews, as the evidence shows that the interviews only took place in March 2020. And it was only on the 6th of April 2020 that Dr. Maglassi asked the HR to solicit references. Although I'm not an IT expert, it is general knowledge that email timestamps are self-generated by the system. And if indeed this email reference is genuine, then it was actually written in May 2019. One therefore wonders how Mera accepted a reference that was written 1 year before the event took place. In my considered view, the very fact of the dates on this email should have been a red flag that the CEO, Dr. Maglassi, ought to have inquired further before taking this email reference seriously. During investigation, I probed Dr. Maglassi further on this and asked if he could forward me the email trail for this particular email from his inbox for my further analysis. In response, he told me that he never received the email in his email box as such, but that it came in hard copy and was dropped at Mera Gate and later on his desk. He then scanned it and sent it to HR. The email dated 13th May 2019 was from a dubious email address, anoni@facebook.com, and addressed to anoni@facebook.com. It is this email that contained the actual damning information against Mr. Manza and was later forwarded to Dr. Maglassi's valid email address, cmaglassi@gmail.com, which we also have been using throughout this investigation, from a chrisekaunda@yahoo.com. With this background, it strikes me as totally suspicious email inbox, but that it only came as a hard copy. Actually, I find him contradict himself because in one breath he said that when he received that email, he tried to respond but got no response. But later on, he told me there is no email trail with chrisekaunda@yahoo.com. Putting all this together, I have serious suspicions about the authenticity or validity of this email reference. As analyzed above, the dates of the email are suspicious. The originating email addresses are suspicious. The contradictory explanation by the CEO about how he got hold of this email is not only suspicious, but a little bit stupefying. And lastly, the absence of the original digital copy of this email leaves me in doubt if ever there was such an email in the first place, and that what was presented was just typed by someone who was keen to botch this whole process. All in all, I have no doubt in my mind that from the get-go, Dr. Maglassi had no intentions of getting the references from Mr. Manza, as he was set on offering the position to Mr. Chilenga, or indeed anyone else but Mr. Manza. I am fortified in my view based on the fact that Dr. Maglassi and Mera took no steps to solicit proper references as per procedure as they did with Mr. Chirenga and or verify this bad reference. A potential employee can get a bad reference from an employer and even a bad character reference from someone who knows them. It is, however, important that the reference must be accurate, it must be fair, and at least be able to be supported by facts. One would have expected Mera to therefore, at the very least, find out from Mr. Mwanza's employer about what kind of an employee he was, or at least balance this bad reference with Mr. Mwanza's own referees. To, however, place reliance on this referee, which could not even get the dates right, did not even have the courage to come out in the open, and who appears to be a WikiLeaks or a Shigoba herself, was seriously unfair and unjust on the part of Dr. Maglas and Mera. Although in my investigation, I was not able to establish that Mr. Godfrey Chirenga is related to Honorable Weran Chirenga, who is a DPP member, I need to state in uncertain terms that even if that was the case, I could not hold that against him, because one does not get to choose relations, and also it is not a crime to belong to a particular political party in a democratic Malawi. It is my finding that Mr. Godfrey Chirenga employment had nothing to do with the relationship with Honorable Weran Chirenga. I am nonetheless of the firm view that Mr. Godfrey Chirenga was employed and benefited from a botched, suspicious, unfair, and unjust recruitment process. I therefore direct that Mera should seek references for Mr. Pasharo Mwanza, including his current employers, as they ought to have done before, to verify the bad reference. If the references are positive, then an offer should be made to the successive candidate, Mr. Pasharo Mwanza. If otherwise, then Mr. Chirenga should be maintained on the position. A report on the implementation of these directives should be submitted to my office by 30th of April 2021. The seventh allegation that was made was of irregular recruitment of the Senior Information and Communications Manager. The complaint alleged that the Senior Information, Communication and Technology Officer, Mr. Bire Kaira, was recruited despite not meeting the prerequisite qualifications of the post, which is a master's degree in ICT. This notwithstanding the fact that the CEO had previously barred other officers from occupying posts, this is notwithstanding the fact that the former CEO had previously barred other officers from occupying posts which require a master's degree because they do not have the qualification. Evidence shows that Mr. Kaira joined Mera in 2009 as an ITC officer. After the functional review in 2015, the position was changed to ICT specialist. In 2017, he was offered an acting position of senior ICT officer because his boss, Mr. Yamikani Malemba, had gone for his master's degree studies in the UK. At the time Mr. Malemba was joining Mera, the position of senior ICT officer only required a bachelor's degree. However, after the functional review, the requirement changed to master's degree. All the people who were on that position were offered the appointments, but were given a chance to do a master's degree. It was during that period that Mr. Kaira acted as senior ICT officer for 14 months. In 2018, there was another functional review which created the position of ICT manager. This in turn created a vacancy at senior ICT officer position as Mr. Malemba became the ICT manager. As of that time, there were two people at grade M5, Mr. Kaira himself and another person. They were both interviewed for the position in March 2020. He was the one who did well in the interviews and was given a conditional offer because he did not have a master's degree. As it stands now, he has a bachelor's of science majoring in computer science, and he's now studying for his master's degree. Mr. Kaira stated that the condition of his offer was that he will be acting senior ICT officer up until he obtains a master's degree. The period within which he is to obtain this master's degree is open, but in practice, his colleagues who were given the same conditional offers in the past were given a period of 2 years, but for some it took a period of 3 years. He said that he's not getting the benefits of the position, he only gets the acting allowance. The issue of conditional offer was confirmed by Mera management, who said that no further opportunities to further opportunities for internal growth as per functional review recommendations, members of staff were granted new and or higher positions on understanding that they shall obtain the required qualifications to align with the new grade requirements. It is on this basis that several officers proceeded on long-term studies and got their required qualifications. There is therefore past precedents where officers were offered higher positions and fulfilled the requirements of those positions afterwards. However, it is important to note that under the Malay Public Service Regulations, Regulation 1 1036, no appointment may be made unless the candidate possesses the qualifications, whether minimum or additional, required for the appointment to any grade or post. Both the recruitment policy in Clause 5 as well as the job description handbook for MERA provides that a person holding a position of a senior officer level must possess a master's degree. Management of MERA considered that these kind of offers are not provided anywhere in the terms and conditions of service, but they still do them as a matter of practice. As shown by evidence, a lot of people have benefited from this practice, and there are some who have held the conditional offers for years without attaining the needed qualifications. To begin with, the fact that this practice is not supported by or is contrary to the MPSR makes it illegal. Moreover, the fact that this practice is also contrary to MERA's own recruitment policy and job descriptions handbook makes it irregular. But even outside this, it should be kept in mind that MERA is a public institution and not a private organization belonging to its current employees. As such, any opportunities arising in it should be available to the general public. By closing these job opportunities to existing MERA employees, management is not only being selfish and acting contrary to principles of openness and transparency, which is what is required in public institutions, but it is also forcing unqualified staff on the institution and depriving it of better and well-qualified staff for its various positions, and thereby depriving this country of better performing public institution in the name of MERA. I do not see why MERA cannot just advertise this post so that people who are qualified apply for the jobs. Moreover, the manner by which this practice is being carried out is prone to abuse. There are no guidelines to guide this type of offers, and it is not known as to what happens when someone fails to attain the qualification. It is further not known the timeline within which a person is supposed to attain the qualification. Mr. Kaida does not yet have a master's degree, and this is 9 months after he was offered the job. I am aware that this has happened to many people in MERA, and they have benefited from this practice. However, the fact that there is a precedence does not in any way make a wrong right. This practice is illegal. It is irregular. I understand that growth of existing members of staff was the priority when coming up with the recruitment policy, as MERA has invested in its members of staff. I do not believe providing them conditional offers when they clearly do not qualify for those positions is the way to go about it. The fact remains that they should not have been called for those interviews in the first place, as they did not qualify for the position. The practice of making conditional offers to members of staff before the attainment of the requisite qualifications by MERA is maladministration. MERA should have focused on training its members of staff, and only after they attain the required qualifications, promote them. To remedy this, I direct that management should revoke all the existing conditional offers, and any offer and any officer who currently is on conditional offer should go back to their substantive position. MERA should advertise the positions and allow those Malawians who have the required qualifications to compete for those positions by 30th of June 2021. Furthermore, those that are currently on conditional offers and have been receiving the acting allowance should also immediately or come up with an agreement with management on how they will refund the acting allowance they've been receiving. For those that at one time been paid acting allowance and have since obtained the qualifications for their positions, they should pay back the money they received as acting allowance for the period of their conditional offers. The repayment should be done over a period. I expect to receive feedback on the final manager, Mr. Ntenji. The allegation was that he lied as a human resource officer, which requires a bachelor's degree, and yet Mr. Nteje was a customs officer. And on investigation, I contacted indeed worked for MRIA, and from the documents they provided me, it shows that Mr. Troy Nteje was appointed on 10th June 2002, and he held the position of revenue officer in the Customs and Exercise Division. He obtained degree of Bachelor of Public Administration on 20th of April 2002. He was dismissed on 19th January 2007 after he failed to explain on an issue of alleged fraud and deliberate failure to follow laid down procedures. When he came and joined MEDA, that was when the issue of him having lied on the employment form to have worked as a human resource officer at MRA arose. My investigation established that this matter was then reported to Anti-Corruption Bureau. I wrote to the Anti-Corruption Bureau inquiring whether they had ever investigated this matter, and they stated that they did receive a complaint in relation to the recruitment of Mr. Nteje by MERA, and that the investigations are still ongoing. Section 123 of the Ombudsman, Section 123 of the Constitution dictates that where a complaint has another practicable remedy available to them, then the Ombudsman cannot assume jurisdiction. From the evidence gathered in this matter, it is clear that this is a complaint that was lodged before ACB prior to being lodged in my office, and the ACB is still conducting its investigation. I will therefore not make any finding on this allegation, as the complaint is already before another institution. Therefore, the complainant has a practical remedy available to him or her. The ninth allegation in the complaint was abuse of office by the former CEO, Dr. Maglassi, for providing benefits in the form of a motor vehicle to his personal assistant, Mrs. Priscilla Nkandawire, contrary to MERA's terms and conditions of service. The evidence shows that the decision to allocate Mrs. Nkandawire a motor vehicle was made on 24th March 2016. Dr. Maglassi only joined MERA in November 2017. Its department's budget. The approval was granted to CEO's office, and that the vehicle would be available to the directors when necessary. MERA management further stated that the vehicle which was allocated to CEO's office was not a benefit to Mrs. Nkandawire. Rather, it was allocated for operation purposes for the CEO's office in the same manner other vehicles were allocated to other departments. The vehicle was allocated to the officers senior at grade M4 and are allowed to drive the car themselves. This is not part of their terms and conditions. This is not part of terms and conditions of MERA, as the only grades entitled to motor vehicles are 3: M1 for the CEO, M2 for the directors, and M3 for managers. They further stated that the cars are for operational purposes, and at the time the decision was made, management decided that the officers allocated the motor vehicles should be allowed for the convenience of MERA operations to take the cars with them when they knock off or on weekends. The poor vehicles that were available could not meet the demands of usage that were there. The CEO said that these vehicles are not for exclusive usage of the officer who has been allocated the car. Other officers in the department can also use it. This is another difference with those who are using the cars, their benefits. No one else can drive their cars. According to the management team, for the officers under the CEO's office, Mrs. Priscilla Nkandawire was the most senior officer who could have been allocated the car. Section 19 of the Energy Regulation Act says that the authority may delegate to the CEO the appointment of staff of such ranks as the authority may specify. Subsection 3 says that the authority may pay to persons in its employee or provide them with such remuneration, pensions, and employment benefits as the authority may, after having obtained such professional advice as it may deem fit, consider as being competitive in the employment market in Malawi. MERA's conditions of service, which were approved on 18th June 2020 under Clause 18.1, titled Transport and Fuel, states staff in grade M1 to 3 and regional managers shall be provided with official vehicles for official use and limited private use. Staff in grade M4 shall be provided with vehicles for official use on needs basis. Designated officers in grades M5 and M7 may be allowed to drive official vehicles on needs basis subject to management approval. I've not been provided with the 2016 terms and conditions of service for MERA when Mrs. Nkandawire was allocated the vehicle. But the evidence has already stated that this was not something that was provided for in the terms and conditions of service. However, looking at the 2018 terms and conditions of service, usage of motor vehicles by an M5 to grade M7 is provided for and regulated in the terms and conditions of service. It is therefore not a deliberate administrative arrangement to ease operations in the office, although it could have started off as such. Clause 18.1 of the terms and conditions of service for MERA make provision for the usage of cars and allocation for fuel. It is only grades M1 to M3 where individuals holding such positions are provided official vehicles and limited private use. Limited private use is not defined, but one can imagine that officers can use the vehicles for their normal personal errands, albeit to a limited extent. There is then the tier of grade M4, where they are provided with the vehicles for official use on a needs basis. This is distinguished with the third tier of grade M5 to M7, who may be allowed to drive vehicles on needs basis subject to management approval. It appears then that according to conditions, those in grade M5 to M7 are just supposed to drive the cars for the particular need, and unlike the grade M4, it is not automatic that they are the ones who get to drive the vehicle. It is discretionary on management. Looking at what is provided in the terms and conditions of service, it is therefore clear that MERA have departed from this. Mrs. Nkandawire and any grade M5 to M7 are only supposed to use the car on a needs. In addition, Mrs. Nkandawire and all M5 to M7 officers are not supposed to be receiving any fuel. The terms and conditions of service only makes provisions for fuel for grade M4 to M1. These terms and conditions of service were approved on 18th of June 2020. They are therefore very new. If the institution saw her duties and indeed those of other members of staff holding the position of M5 to M7 as requiring vehicles for official and some private use, to have included them in the terms and conditions of service. As I've said, these terms and conditions of service are far too recent for there to be any power structure or system being applied by MERA. The allocation of the 200 liters of fuel for any grade M5 to M7 is therefore contrary to the terms and conditions of service and therefore irregular. To make the situation worse, MERA, through their email to members of staff on 22nd July 2020, have gone further and informed the members of staff in grades M5 to M7 not to provide receipts or to account for the fuel anymore. These officers will now just have to receive the 200 liters of fuel every month, regardless of how much they actually used or needed. As far as I'm concerned, therefore, this is an entitlement and a benefit. Frankly, I'm of the view that this is not something that the CEO could have done without the involvement of the board. As I said, the terms and conditions are new, and 1 month later, the CEO amended these terms and conditions without the consent of the board. Section 19.3 of the Energy Regulation Act demands that such things as remuneration are the mandate of the board after consultations. I'm indeed fortified in my position when one looks at clause 1 of MERA's terms and conditions of service, which informs all members of staff that any amendment initiated by management shall not be notified to staff before they are presented for the body's approval. The unilateral decision of management in this case to give grades M5 to M7 200 liters of fuel per month and to inform them that the allocation is no longer on a needs basis is contrary to the law and terms and conditions of service. Therefore, it is maladministration. All in all, it is my finding that grades M5 to M7 are not entitled to have a car full time for personal errands. Management can only exercise its discretion to allow them to drive themselves on a needs basis. Mrs. Priscilla Nkandawire is allowed to drive an official motor vehicle as she was given authority and approval by the CEO then, Mr. Rafael Kamoto, and is required by the terms and conditions of service. However, her usage of the car is supposed to be on a needs basis only. I therefore direct that all grades M5 to M7 are to use the vehicle as and when there is need. The provision of 200 liters of fuel for grades M5 to M7 is illegal, as it is not provided for in the terms and conditions of service, and it goes against the text of the terms and conditions of service, which provides that the usage of the cars by these grades is only on a needs basis. This should stop immediately, as it is abuse of public resources. MERA should revert to the system that conforms with its own terms and conditions of service. Should the MERA be of the view that officers holding these positions require to have official vehicles which they can take home and also be allocated 200 liters of fuel, then the same should get the approval of the board and be reflected in their terms and conditions of service. MERA should furnish me with a report on how they have complied with these directives by 30th of June 2021. The final complaint has to do with the irregular recruitment of the Director of Legal Services, Mr. Ishmael Shwoko, who is the current acting CEO. The said complaint alleged that Mr. Shwoko did not qualify for the said position as he did not possess a master's degree in law when he was recruited. Furthermore, it alleged that Mr. Ishmael Shwoko was appointed as the acting CEO by the board of MERA on 11th August 2020, when the said board was dissolved on 15th July 2020. They therefore stated that the appointment was illegal. According to the advert for the position of Director of Legal Services or Board Secretary, which was placed in the Nation newspaper on 4th of December 2012, the qualifications and attributes required for the position were a bachelor's degree in law from a reputable institution, 5 years experience at senior management level, a postgraduate degree in law was simply put as an added advantage. Mr. Shwoko himself stated that during the interviews, he showed the panel his original degree certificates, which included a master's degree in business administration, which he attained from the Eastern and Southern Africa Management Institute, ESAMI, on 18th of March 2006. He further said that at the time in question, all that was required by the advert and even MERA policies was for him to have a master's degree, not a specific master's degree. From the documents have been presented, the requirement for a master's degree in law at that time was only an added advantage, and it was not a mandatory requirement. Mr. Shwoko satisfied all the requirements for the job. For all intents and purposes, therefore, the allegation is without merit, and I dismiss it entirely. On the issue of Mr. Shwoko's irregular appointment as acting CEO, on the ground that there was no board at the time of the said appointment under Section 18 of the Energy Regulation Act, the powers, okay, on the issue of Mr. Shwoko's irregular appointment as acting CEO, on the ground that there was no board at the time of the said appointment, under Section 18 of the Energy Regulation Act, the powers to appoint the CEO do indeed vest in the board. However, as correctly pointed out by MERA, this was not a substantive appointment that needed to be done by the board. In my view, it was proper for the Secretary to the Cabinet, as the one responsible for the overall management of public service, to ensure that an interim measure was put in place that the operations of MERA were not affected. I therefore do not think there was anything wrong with the acting appointment, although with the advice from the Attorney General, one hopes in future such letters will be written in a manner that acknowledges that there is no board in place. As such, the Secretary to the President and Cabinet is the one making such interim appointment to allow for the functions of the institution not to be stifled where there's a vacuum. I therefore dismiss this allegation in its entirety. So these are our major findings in this report. I would encourage everyone to read the full report to get a full picture of what has been happening at MERA in as far as recruitment is concerned, which led us to title this report Institutional Anarchy. Once you have read the whole report, the picture you get is that of an institution that has clear legal and policy regulatory framework and has recourse to information on good practices. Instead of following the Office of the President and Cabinet, the board itself, and the management decided to do otherwise and went ahead to make decisions that were illegal, irregular, and contrary to good practices. Until doing so became institutionalized within the institution. The unfortunate part is that there are real victims of these decisions and actions. People's jobs and therefore livelihoods have been greatly affected as presented in this report. That is the face of maladministration. It has got victims who have got faces. When as public officers we make wrong and illegal decisions, real people get hurt, as we have seen in this report. But we are a country of laws, and we should not sanctify illegality by handling it with kid gloves. Those who decide to depart from the dictates of the law as they discharge their functions should be personally be held liable. This is what we hope we have managed to do in this report. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ombudsman, for that investigative report that you have titled Institutional Anarchy. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can all appreciate from the report that the Honorable Ombudsman has just completed presenting to you all, you see that there are institutions that are supposed to implement the directions that have been given by the Ombudsman. Let me invite Miss Phyllis Manguluti, who's representing the board chair for MERA, so that can give a reaction to what has been presented in this report. Ms. Manguluti.
Thank you, Honorable Ombudsman, and all protocol observed. I'm here representing the chair of the board and all members of the board. And with me, I'm accompanied by the acting CEO, Mr. Ishmael Chwoko. We have received the report. As a board, we were appointed and we started our operations in December 2020. And one thing that we noted is there was that complaint that was in the hands of the Ombudsman. So we were waiting for this report patiently, and now that the report is with us, we'll go through the report and we'll give you feedback based on the dates that you've given us. And we believe that it will also help us as we are formulating policies and reviewing all the policies and making sure MERA is put in a position where it's conducive for everyone and the rule of law is taking its course. Otherwise, I have nothing to add from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, we also can appreciate that Malawi Energy Regulatory Authority, the functions that they perform are under the Ministry of Energy. Here we have Mr. Matanda, who is the Principal Secretary for Energy, for his remarks. Thank you very much.
As a ministry, we do not have specific comments, but we appreciate the efforts that have gone into the investigation. We will certainly work together with the MERA board to ensure that the recommendations that have been given are followed up. So thank you, Honorable Ombudsman. That's what I would say for now.
Thank you very much, PS. Members of the media, you will have an opportunity to interview the Honorable Ombudsman and any of the respondents that we have here. We also have copies of the reports that we're going to give to each of the media houses. Because of the urgency of the report and that it involved people's jobs, we did not manage to print, to have it professionally printed, and we'll do that later. But we have the reports that we can distribute now. And for closing, we'll invite again Mr. Temwa Muol to give us the closing prayer before the interviews. Thank you very much.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you for the time that you blessed us and time that the report was presented. We thank you for this is for the betterment of Malawi. And we continue to pray. Make us to be a nation that abides by the instructions of our Father, that are to guide us in a moral and ethical way, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray and we thank you. Amen.
Thank you very much.